Hi everyone, this is Matt from Studio Raygun. In this video I'm going to talk about how I managed to create an AngularJS frontend on the back of Drupal 8's REST API to make a little Ajax driven task app, which I'm going to demonstrate before we get into the video. So this is a task, this is description, and we can add the task. It appears up here. And then when we click on it, we just get the output of that in this right column. And then you can just click through them like this. And of course we've got the obligatory filter as well, so new and my. Okay, so that's how it works. The first thing that I did was install Drupal. Now I had to install Drupal into a subdirectory. I first tried installing it on the actual root and then moving it, but that caused all kinds of problems. So I recommend that if you are going to follow this tutorial, you put it into a subdirectory. The reason for that is that we just want Drupal as its data source. We just want to get the data out of Drupal, expose it via an API, and let AngularJS do the rest. And Drupal 7 does have a REST API plugin, or module rather. I haven't used it. I really use this as an excuse to have a go with Drupal 8, which has some web services already available to it in its core. So if you're going to, if you install Drupal and then go into extend, which is actually just a list of modules, if you're familiar with Drupal 7, scroll right down to the bottom and we have web services. So these are the ones that we need. So we just, I assume that we need them all, so I just enabled all of them. And then go into structure, and what I did was create a content type called task. It's just a basic standard content type. We didn't actually use the date field in the end, so I mean you can just have a content type with the title and a body field. And then we can see the data here in Drupal that is reflected on the front end. So this is a task and my new task just here. Now to get these out of Drupal, what we need to do is create a view. And typically in Drupal you'd create a view to display your content, which is exactly what I've done here, except these are REST exports rather than just standard views. So to give you an example of that, add new view, forget about the name, we've got you can create a page or you can create a block. Now that's fairly standard for Drupal, but in Drupal 8 we've got this REST export settings. I'm just going to go back and show you what I've done. So inside tasks, which is the two views that I've created for this, we can see that the view is set up exactly the same as any other view, but it's a REST export. So I haven't actually named these, but this is going to be a task list, and this one's going to be each individual task. So all we've got here is the title and the node ID, and you can see that this is what's being outputted. Obviously we want the title to display on the page, and we want the node ID, which is just the ID of that piece of content, so that we can link to it. And these are available in /tasks. So if I go to Drupal /tasks, you can see that you get this JSON feed here. Now this is great because it just enables us to use this data anywhere on the web, as long as you've got access to this domain. And if I go to /61, you can see that it just produces the specific task based on that ID. In terms of security, you should be logged in to create content, but what I've had to do for this example is go into my roles, and inside anonymous user I've had to, that's not the one, edit the permissions to enable anonymous users, that's non-logged in guest users, to be able to create content for the task. Otherwise, I would have to be logged in to be able to create content here. And obviously that's not what we want for the purpose of a demo. So I've had to enable all of these, and also I think administer content as well, and potentially create and edit URL aliases. I'm not sure about that one. I could uncheck that and test it, but yeah, I'll do that later. So to recap, we install Drupal in a subdirectory. We enable our REST services, web services. We then set up a content type called task. We then create a view using a REST export so that we expose the data to an API. And we then change the permissions for the anonymous user so that anonymous users can post to the task content type. Right. So that's Drupal setup. We just need the front end now. So if we go into here, let's have a look. So it effectively comprises of 4 files. I'm using Twitter Bootstrap to for the front end design, just because I'm a bit lazy. The whole thing is wrapped inside a controller called task list, and we can split it up into a list of tasks, the form to add a new task, and the form to filter tasks. So it's probably worth just going through this in that direction, actually. So app.js is the actual application JavaScript file that uses controllers and services. Controllers look after parts of a document, and services can be used by controllers. It's a way of modularizing certain bits of code. So, for example, if I wanted to get the tasks out of the system from multiple different places within the application, I would set up a service, which is what I've done here. So we'll probably start with this one. So we set up a service called getTasks, and then we're looking at this link here, which, as I showed you earlier, is the JSON feed of tasks. And then, should that be successful, which it obviously is, we are sending that data back into our controller. So if we look at the task list here, which is task list controller, this whole chunk is the task list controller. Now, in AngularJS, you can inject a scope, which which basically talks to the DOM. So in this case, scope.tasks is tasks. And what we're doing is we're using the tasks getTasks service, and then we're getting the data out of that service, and we're just sending that back to the view, which is just here. And this is just, I mean, if you're familiar with PHP, you would do a for each loop to then loop through the tasks and output them on the front end, and that's exactly what this is doing. So we're saying for each task in tasks, do this. So we're outputting the task node ID and the task title, and that corresponds to title and NID. There's a couple of things here. I'm prefixing everything with data because you can get away with just using ng, but this enables, if you prefix it with data, then the HTML document validates better against W3C standards. A lot of people aren't too bothered about that, but I think it just adds an extra layer of sort of cleanliness to the front end. I'm also using bind HTML. which is required by this sanitize plugin for Angular. And what that effectively does, or what I'm using it for in this case, is any ampersands or weird characters get cleaned up as they get outputted onto the screen. So ampersands will show as ampersands. They will show as this and not that, which is the encoded character. I could probably get rid of the field type actually, because that's a type of task that I had previously. I had meetings and events and things like that, but we're not using that, so forget about that. Right, so we're using a service to get our tasks, and then we're pulling that service into the controller and then passing it to the view via a scope object and outputting them here. Quite simple. To view each task, we have used routing, or routing if you're American. This is another plugin that AngularJS uses called NGRoute that you can see we are pulling in just here. And this is like the syntax here I'm not a big fan of, to be honest. It doesn't look very nice. Coming from a PHP framework background, I don't know, I think it could be simplified a little bit, but hey ho. However, it's reasonably simple to understand. So what it's saying is when this URL is hit, task slash and then any ID, that's the task ID in this case, show this template URL and use this controller. So controller single task. Let's go into our controllers. And if you scroll down to the bottom, this controller is available here. Again, we're passing in the scope. We're also passing in HTTP dependency and root params. And all that's saying is if we go to this URL slash tasks slash the ID that is passed to it, in this case the task ID, which we saw up here, just get the data in exactly the same way as this service is doing here. The only difference between these two is, well, this isn't a service, it's just a controller. Personal preference, you could put it into a service if you wanted. In fact, I could probably modify this service to allow a parameter to be passed to it, but I haven't bothered for the purpose of this. So yeah, all it's saying is it's going to go to this URL and then it's going to take that ID that's passed to it and return just a task, so not tasks. And if we have a look at singletask.php, you can see that's just outputted here. There's your controller, sorry. There's the controller. Again, we're binding it, title, field date. I'm not sure if we actually bothered with that one. And then the body. Again, I'm binding it, HTML binding it so that it encodes any characters so nothing comes out weirdly. Oh, one other thing on the URLs, the routing. By default, we would put hashes in the URL, so it might look something like, I think it's like something like that. But we don't want to do that. We actually want URLs to be like real URLs and for the browser to behave as expected. So forwards and backward functions act as expected. I don't really know a great deal about this, but this makes it work. I'm not sure, we probably need to put in a polyfill or something for older browsers because it's HTML5, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. And neither should you. Okay, so that's viewing tasks. So we've got the task list and we'll use a single task controller to show this right view here. In terms of adding the tasks, we are using this form. Now, ng submit is basically saying when this form gets submitted via this function. So that function is new task. So let's have a look at controllers, and this is probably the largest part of it. So so new task equals this function. What we're doing is we're going to first set up a blank object called package, and then we're going to pass some values to it. Now these are just coming from the view, so scope.title, scope.body, that's title, and well, description in this case, but Drupal expects it as body because that corresponds with body here, and title is implicit. On Drupal 7 we used to see the title field in here, but it doesn't appear that that's the case anymore. And then we're passing it this links value. Now I'm not entirely sure what this is. I think this may be a new addition with Drupal 8, but what it's effectively saying is that the type of node, the type of content that we're creating is task. If you're not that familiar with Drupal, when you install it out of the box, you get article and page content type, so you can add an article, it's like a blog post, and you can add a page. Task is obviously one that I've created for the purpose of this video, and obviously I've passed it in there. And then what we want to do is perform a post request using this URL. Now the Drupal REST API, this is its endpoint for creating content, entity/node. I don't know why. I mean, there's probably some logic behind it, but it's not semantically very valuable. It'd be nice if it was entity/node/add or something, or maybe that's just wishful thinking. We're sending a post request, and the data that we're sending to it is the package that we defined above. The biggest stumbling point for me was the headers bit here. I wasn't sure what was implicit and what wasn't. Now you do need to send it a CSRF token, which you can get when you've enabled the REST API. You can get this in Drupal by going to here, and this is basically generated for you. So that is used not for authentication, but I think to stop cross-site forgeries. It's not something that I know a great deal about. This headers area for me was a little bit of a, like I said, a stumbling block. I don't need the authorization bit because I set my content type permissions so that anonymous users can create content. If I wanted users to be logged in, then I'd need to do something a bit more with this. I don't know what yet, though. That's what I hope to find out a bit more about down the line. And then, so that's going to post it to the site. And then on success, we're just going to clear these two inputs because obviously the page doesn't refresh, so there's no reason for them to clear. So if I just comment those out, refresh this, and then say another task, another description, you'll see it add it, but the content doesn't disappear because there's no page reload. So just bring them back in and then say another task 2, another description 2. Oh, I need to refresh the page. So another task 3. There we go. So it adds it and then clears the input. What I also needed to do was again call that getTasks method. And the reason for this was because we want this section to update. Now, a lot of tutorials will tell you to use push. So I mean, you might do something like scope.tasks.push, and then you know, put the input, take the input from the title, and then push it into this array here. But the problem with doing that is that it doesn't account for URLs. So if you can look in the bottom left, task 64, task 63, task 62. if you just take something from the input and then add it here, it has no idea what URL to use because it's just taking these values. So if we recall the getTasks method, it updates this area here with URLs and everything straight from the database. And that's that with that, really. I'll quickly show you the filtering functionality. Now this is one of my favourite features of AngularJS that I've recently discovered after using it, because I don't really need to write any JavaScript at all. We have a search input, and we're using a model called task filter. And if you see I'm highlighting that there, that gets highlighted up here. So this is the list of tasks, and this is the search input. So if we bind that model to here, you can see you can pass in this little parameter called filter, which is native to AngularJS. And what it's looking for is task filter, and essentially all it does is filter the content that it finds here by the content that's typed into this input. So as I say, another 3. That's interesting. I don't know why it's producing. That's 10. But yeah, it broadly works. The only thing I haven't done with this tutorial is any animation, mainly because I couldn't be bothered. Because the animation stuff in Angular is quite nice in what it can do, but I've never found it to be particularly nice to work with. Sometimes things don't happen as expected, and it's just a bit of a pain for little gain, although it's something that I will explore a little bit further in the future. But that about wraps it up, I think. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to put in the description a link to, I'm going to write a little bit of a blog post about this, but hopefully I'm just going to use the video because that's easier for me. I'm lazy. And it's all on GitHub as well, so if you want to pull this and work with it, do whatever you want with it, then that'll be great. I hope you found this useful. Drupal 8 looks like it's shaping up to be really, really nice. The user interface is good. It's responsive, which is what the community really needs. And bringing the API into core stands it in good stead as a CMS for the future. I think it will absolutely be nipping at WordPress's heels if WordPress doesn't get an API into core as well, because with these front-end frameworks like AngularJS, I think that's the way that web development seems to be, or a direction that it's going in, to create these nice, quick loading front ends. So we're going to be doing more of it in the future. See you later.